200 billion is an unbelievably ridiculous amount of money to spend on football. The Prophet ﷺ was making tawaf around the Kaaba and he said, how pure you are and how pure is your fragrance, how great you are and how great is your sanctity. By the one in whose hand is the soul of Muhammad, the sanctity of the believer is greater to Allah than your sanctity. The reality is, the sanctity of the believer is greater than the sanctity of the Kaaba and definitely greater than the sanctity of football. Yet Qatar has built 8 stadiums which actually have more seats than there are Qatari citizens. So after the World Cup, these stadiums will basically become irrelevant and won't generate any wealth at all. How can it be then that Qatar spends 200 billion on the World Cup whilst the Ummah have a right for that money to be spent on them? In fact, this money has been made through the selling of oil and gas in the first place, which, according to Islam, are public property and do not belong to the state anyway. Having said that, this money could have been spent much more productively. Palestine, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and so many other countries are in dire need of food and aid. People say, but Qatar has already given so much charity to XYZ. Yeah, how much? How much charity have they actually given? Over the last few years, Qatar has given less than 7 billion. 7 billion compared to 200 billion. A pathetic attempt to act like they actually care. Qatar could have used a fraction of this 200 billion to develop a semiconductor chip industry, which only a few nations in the world actually have the ability of. It could have used a fraction of this 200 billion to develop an automotive industry, or a military weapons industry, or used it to fund cutting-edge research and development. But instead, it wasted it on preparing for the World Cup, all the while digging holes in the ground to carry on pumping out oil and gas as it has done in the past. Finally, and most importantly, Qatar could have used all of this wealth, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given them, in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to free themselves from the current secular world order and to have its own vision for the world based on Islam. This wealth could have been used to establish the deen in the Muslim world, to remove the borders which keep the ummah divided, to liberate the oppressed, and to carry the message of the deen to the rest of the world. It's such a shame then that even though all of the above could have been achieved, Qatar, just like the rest of the governments in the Muslim world, they've settled for less and have chosen the narrowness of this life instead of the vastness of the Akhirah.